continuing to test the Iron Will Outfitters broadhead, and if you've looked at my previous videos, I've shot this thing out to 100 yards. It flies impeccably, and I introduced it with all the details and specs and so forth in a previous video, and now I'm going to get into the hard-nose testing itself, and I'm going to be testing penetration, and I'm going to be testing durability as well. This is my first penetration test. I'm shooting into about 60 layers of cardboard, and I hope that's enough to stop these things. I got the Reinhardt behind it just in case. But first I'll be going with the G5 Montec and then the Iron Will Outfitters. Let's go see what happened. From just the initial inspection, you can see the Iron Will is the second one. It's above the G5 Montec, and you can see in terms of the arrows themselves, penetrated a couple inches further. And here's this big wad of cardboard. Let's see the layer differences. From that first penetration test, you really can see the penetration of the Iron Will. It shines. That went through a little over an inch. It went through 7 layers of cardboard, which was about 1.25 inches more than the G5 Montec. And afterwards, the Montec's blades just slide right across the nail. They've obviously been dulled, whereas the Iron Wills still bite. That's that A2 steel for you. They just bite into the nail. So now we're going to put it through another penetration test, and this is going to be 3 layers of compressed fiberboard. So first we'll go with the G5. Now we'll go with the Iron Will. There you can see the penetration difference. The Iron Will on the right and the Montec on the left. The Iron Will buried, again, about 1/2 inch further. That was a good test there. You could see that the Iron Will penetrated about 1/2 inch more than the Montec did. And the penetration is interesting because you're getting greater penetration with the Iron Will, even though it has a larger cut. It's cutting more tissue than the Montec. The Montec has a diameter of 1 1/16 inches, as does this with the 2 blades. The Iron Will has 1 1/16 inches, but then this has 0.75 inches in the cross bleeders, and this only has 3 blades. So it comes out roughly 1.8 inches of cutting diameter, of cut, 1.8 inches of cut, as opposed to about 1.6. So even with the larger cut of tissue, you're getting deeper penetration in soft material as well as hard material. In terms of the heads afterwards, again, the Montec was already dull, not dull, but it wasn't catching on nail after the last test in the cardboard, whereas the Iron Will, even after the wood, it's kind of surprising. It's still shaving nail there and catching on the nail. It's still sticky. So then the other thing is the Montec the ferrule did bend, unfortunately, in that wood, whereas the Iron Will still spins true. The Montec doesn't spin quite as well. It's got a wobble because of that bend. Okay, so that was good comparative sake. Now we're going to look at the little more durability stuff, and we're going to see how well this same Iron Will head, this is the same one we've been using, will cut through 16 gauge steel. And you remember from my earlier video, we did that with, I think it was 6 other fixed blade heads, as well as a bunch of mechanical heads, and you can look at the other videos to see that. But now let's see what happens with the Iron Will through this 16 gauge steel. Here you can see the penetration through this 16 gauge steel plate, which is impressive. And you see that just from this angle, I'm going to look at it closer up, you see that the tip did not curl. But it is interesting, at the top of the ferrule, you can see the tip does get stuck on a hard surface like that. Still had good penetration, but you can see the tip of that ferrule has been chipped away and is kind of hanging on there. So let's pull it out and see how the whole head did overall. Okay, so after going through the steel plate, the head did fairly well. Especially compared to all those other heads that I shot. See, the other heads experienced significant damage. Now you can see, I don't know if that's zooming in there, you can see the bleeders, the bleeders get a little thinned out. They definitely got dinged up. Those would have to be replaced. The ferrule, you saw in that one point, actually now I've I knocked off that piece getting it out. But right here, it was dinged up, and there's a chunk of that got hung up on the steel. But that's just a minor little deal. And so, obviously it's not cutting into nail anymore, but it did well. The tip itself, see if you can see that, it held pretty firm. I mean, there's a little bit of a dent on it, but not as much as maybe expected. So this head did really well compared to all the other fixed blades against the steel plate that I've tested. This has been second only to the Bishop Holy Trinity in that 3-blade design of S7 tool steel. But compared to all the others, it did really well. Okay, now I'm going to shoot this into cinder block. I hate to do this because I really like this head, but I tested some of the other ones on the cinder block, specifically the Bishops, and so I want to shoot this one into the cinder block. Now, I got to be honest that when I was pulling out the last head from that steel plate, the ferrule bent a little bit from me pulling it out, and that's not the head's fault. I mean, that's my fault. So I'm having to use a different head. So I'm using the head that I used in some long-range testing. So it's been shot into a bale, several times, and but now I'm going to shoot it into the cinder block and see how well it does on a hard impact. Okay, as you saw, the head penetrated well into that cinder block, which was really cool. Now, with that, with it being a 2-blade, it never did have to get to the bleeders, so it's a relatively small area that it penetrated with, but it did penetrate into it. And if you get really close here, you can see that the head, I'll let it focus there, you see that the head did really well. I mean, it got chipped up here, dinged up here. The tip got a little dinged up, and that ferrule that I talked about, this is a different one than the one I shot into steel, but the ferrule caught right there, and so the ferrule got a bit nicked up. Same thing on this side. Actually, it did better than I thought for hard impact tests like that into cinder block, and it still spins well. So this head is done really well. Since I got all this set up, I'm going to go ahead and test it. And one more thing, my steel flat bar test, and see what happens. There you can see an 1/8-inch thick steel flat bar, and I've shot other heads into this. The only ones that have survived have been the Bishops. Let's see how this does. That was cool. Let's go see. Okay, as for the bar itself, you can see that it made a nice cut in that bar, and you can see a little bit of light through the bar. So it actually penetrated through the bar, but you can also see a chunk of the head. That's actually the ferrule part I was talking about getting stuck. The ferrule on the left and on the right actually got embedded in the steel. And as for the head, let's see, we'll examine that and see. Look at the head itself. Unfortunately, it did not fare too well. You can see the bleeders never got touched. They never actually went in far enough to touch. But the ferrule did peel off. As I've mentioned a few times, it peeled off there, and the blades just disappeared. I'm not sure where they went, but they're gone somewhere in my backyard. So the head did not make it through the flat bar test, though it did punch a hole through it, but didn't endure it. So from all my testing on this head, I've put it through a few tests. I've shot it long range, flew like a dart out to 100 yards, and it was very forgiving in that dart. I was even a little shaky. The wind was blowing a bit. It just flew really well. And then in the penetration testing, it out-penetrated the G5 Montec, which even has a smaller cut than this head, the Iron Will does. It out-penetrated in cardboard. It out-penetrated it in that 1.5 inch of fiberboard. And then the head did really well against the steel plate, the 16-gauge steel plate. It did better than all the other fixed blades I've tested, with the exception of the Bishop Holy Trinity. And then in terms of the concrete, or the cinder block, it did really well, stuck pretty deeply into the cinder block. and has a really stout two blades in that front, and they penetrated well, and it looked pretty well, looked pretty strong after that. The only place that it failed, and you can't really call it a failure so much, was in the steel, the 1/8 inch steel flat bar, and there it just kind of fell apart. But overall, I have to give this head an A plus. I'd put this up there, toward the very top.